Puck Podcast, Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13, Tim Booth, Seattle Times. It's all brought to you by fabulous folks there at Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years, makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Alpha IPA, hosts of your other favorite brews. Tap room open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. We talk Seahawks football with Tim and Curtis. Well, that was a drunkest game I've ever seen in my life. Jesus, Tim, I've never seen anything like that when I watched on Sunday.
That was several bottles of Boone's Farm at the Coug late on a Friday night before an Apple Cup. That was that level of drunkenness when it came to describing that football game last night or yesterday.
I think after the third fumble, was it the third one when Laviscus fumbled it and then kicked it? Was that the third one?
Yes.
Yeah, Curtis, I started laughing at that. Not even mad, just laughed. I'm like, I just laughed out loud. It was so damn funny watching that.
I mean, they had a blocked extra point, 3 fumbles on special teams, and a kickoff return touchdown allowed in the first 25 minutes of the game.
Yes, sir.
It's just it's as silly a game as I can remember seeing. And this is a Seahawks team we're talking about. You know how many absolutely just unhinged games we've seen this team play through the years, and that's up at the top of the list. That game was absurd yesterday.
Yeah. I don't envy you, both of you, Tim. I don't envy you like writing a game story for that. I know you didn't. You did like kind of the notebooks or the reflections of the game.
Yeah.
But like having to write a game story to that, I don't know how I would put that one into words.
Well, it's you put it into the context of sort of how everything changed with the one play, with the Leonard Williams play. And then you kind of, in my mind, that was, that might go down as a play of the season, depending on how things, end up playing out. But you kind of encapsulate everything that happened before and then after, like the comedy of errors that was before, and then how drastically things changed for them based around that one play and how just so much kind of went their way for the most part after he makes that play and has the interception return.
Yeah, I mean, Curtis, it was that one play in particular. We'll get into that, but I think just to sit back here, right, Curtis, and on December 2nd, as they start into December, right? This is the playoff push, right? And they're 7-5. I mean, just how surprised are you that they're in this position right now after 12?
Given where we were heading into the last 49ers game?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't expect them to be 7-5 at this. In fact, I texted my buddy who lives in Phoenix who's going to the game next week. I was like, I was not expecting you to be seeing a 7-5 football team next week when they come down there. I wasn't. Think about where they were at that time. Defense was still scuffling. They'd made a little improvement against the Rams, but the run defense had still been awful at that point. They still had no run game to go with as well. So that, there was reasons to be really pessimistic about them. And apparently Ernest Jones coming in has, one, helped the linebacker group much better and turned Leonard Williams into freaking, Warren Sapp on the defensive line, because goodness gracious, the play that guy has had over the last 2 weeks is just as good as any Seahawks defensive lineman has had, Stretch has had. In how long? Like, who's the last guy who can come? Is it Cortez? It might be all the way back to Cortez for a guy being that dominant from an interior defensive line position. I know Jaron Reed had 10.5 sacks the 1 year here a little while back. One of the only, I think, 3 different guys in franchise history to do that from the interior. But this is different, what he's doing for them. And yeah, I mean, to have the game completely, you're staring at 28-7 in the face. Very, with absolutely everything going wrong for you, and all of a sudden you're back in the game. the momentum completely flips on Leonard Williams in the pick 6. Just a great individual play by him to make that and get off to the races and take that for a 92-yard touchdown. But yeah, I mean, you did not expect the team to get to this point given where they were at coming out of the bye week with the 49ers game, and a lot of the stuff has really improved. Defensively, they look much, much better the last few weeks. Still have their warts on offense in some areas, but it's a different team than we saw a month and change ago for sure.
And Tim, they're showing why they hired Macdonald, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you see what they've done over the last 3 games in that play in particular. I mean, you see a scenario which they drop their best defensive lineman into coverage and he ends up picking the ball off. I mean, they confused a Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting because I remember we had the conversation after the Rams loss, and we were wondering why guys haven't been unlocked in the way that we saw Mike Macdonald unlock guys in Baltimore and have guys like Jadeveon Clowney and Kyle Van Noy and Kyle Hamilton just have these incredible impact seasons playing in that defensive system for the Ravens. And I remember us having this conversation, like, why haven't these guys been unlocked with the Seahawks? And lo and behold, Leonard Williams sure as hell been unlocked. Devin Witherspoon sure has been unlocked in the last couple of weeks. Ernest Jones, obvious, and Tyrese Knight have played really well, and I think that has allowed them to do a little bit more with some of those guys. But we're finally seeing, to your point, Puck, we're finally seeing the reasons and the thought behind, hey, this guy's a defensive whiz, this guy's a defensive genius in theory. We're seeing it come to fruition, now. Yeah. And Leonard Williams and Devin Witherspoon, obviously they're the guys that are standing out with what they're doing on the field, but those are the 2 primary examples of guys who it feels like he's found the way to unlock them and get more out of them than what we were seeing in the past, and certainly in the first half of this season.
I mean, guys, that trade, and again, I'm going to let it play out, but I think it's okay to look ahead. That trade of Ernest Jones might go down, has the possibility, minus Lynch. I don't think it's ever going to. It's not going to eclipse Marshawn Lynch. That has the makings of the second best trade he's ever made in season.
Yeah, you could put Dwayne Brown on the list too, because I think Dwayne Brown was pretty good for the time that he was here. But I think it also depends too. Are you able to keep him? Are you able to keep Ernest after this season? Because so far in the sample we've seen, he's been really good, and he's allowed your defense to do some different things that have been extremely impactful. If it's a 9-10 game stint that he's here with, great. That then you clearly improved yourselves for this season. But if you can parlay this into something moving forward where he's, your next version of Jordan Brooks or whatever playing that position, then yeah, you definitely could be talking about one of the better trades that John's ever made in season for them.
And it's kind of wild that parallels are this way, and people have pointed it out that when he was with Baltimore and they made the trade to get Roquan Smith, and all of a sudden that defense took a leap back there too. It's not the exact same circumstances, obviously, but like it's kind of funny just how much of a parallel there is between both of those trades helping a defense take this massive jump to the next level. And Ernest Jones has been terrific for them. The move to cut Tyrell Dodson and put Tyrese Knight in the starting lineup too. Like that's a ballsy play, and it seems to be working out for them as well. Julian Love is playing like an absolute star in the back end as well. Like I think it took until seeing a couple more plays yesterday for me to go, man, he's been absurdly good this year. Like I knew it, but like there's another level that he's gone to with his game that's just really impressive. So there's pieces all throughout that defense has made a massive leap. And then you talk about the scheme of it alone too. Like, as we mentioned on the Williams play, they've got 6-7 guys mugged up on the line of scrimmage to have a blitz look. And then only 4 come, and one of them's Witherspoon blitzing off the slot. And you have 2 defensive linemen in Reed and Williams dropping underneath, and he gets into the passing lane and he tries to throw it behind the blitzer and gets the tip and everything. It's just, it's starting to come together as a defense. You're starting to see why, I think schematically, why he was coveted as a head coach option this offseason. And now the pieces are starting to fit into place the way he wants it on that side of the ball too, with Williams, Jones, Julian Love, Devin Witherspoon, all being really key parts of that defense.
Yeah, it just I think the way that they write him, it looks like they have the disguise of it more now is starting to come to fruition, that you don't know where the pressure is coming. You're kind of well, is it coming on this side? Is it coming on that side? Where before, and probably, right, Tim, the easiest explanation is, listen, this stuff takes time. They probably weren't going to pick it up right away. They don't play in the preseason, and they, first of all, weren't going to show everything in the preseason. So, yeah, you can run it and practice all you want, but this was going to be an issue for them. And it was going to be some growing pains. And then they just decided, right, Tim, that these two linebackers weren't cut out, so they had to make a move there. But it's going to be a defense that you've seen here in the last 2 weeks, but slowly, surely, is going to get more and more comfortable with the style of the confusion that he likes to play with.
Yeah, and if you're going to play in that way, you have to be assignment sound in everything else that you're doing. And I don't know if we saw a group that was really good at that the first handful of, and we learned nothing from those first 3 games. I mean, think back to the first 3 games. We learned absolutely nothing. It wasn't until that stretch where they started to struggle that we learned things, and those things got exposed. Those assignment errors got exposed. You have to be assignment sound in what you're doing. If all of a sudden you're going to bring, Devin Witherspoon and Rayshon Jenkins on a blitz, and you're dropping Jaron Reed and Leonard Williams into coverage, like everyone else has to have their shit together in order to make that thing work. So I think that's part of what you're seeing too, is guys are feeling more comfortable in the roles that they're in. They're playing their roles in the different schemes the way they're supposed to. And then you're allowed at that point to create as much chaos and confusion as we've seen the last couple of weeks, especially.
Curtis is going to jump back in. He was frozen. He was still talking, but the video was frozen.
And it was a great freeze.
I kind of wanted him to stay on because the audio was still there, but he was just frozen with the. And I thought that would be great. I said, listen, you don't got to jump out, but he's gonna jump back in here. As Tim Booth, Curtis Crabtree, Ground Puck Podcast, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery. What do you? Maybe I'll save the Ryan Grubb stuff for when Curtis comes back on. But 7-5 first place. It's December 2nd. We've talked about how surprised we were about this, especially where they were, in the situation heading in to the 49ers game. But through 12 games, so what does this signal? I think maybe to the fan base. What does this signal to ownership and to John Schneider with the move that they made?
Well, I think it signals a couple things. I think it signals that this group has some resolve to it, that it has some, everyone has pride in being out there and being a professional. But this group has some resolve, because it very easily could have gone really downhill in that Niners game and that last drive with Geno scoring the touchdown, and which we've talked about how that's looking back on it now, that's kind of a season turning drive and score that they had there. But this group has something about them where they weren't going to let that losing skid get out of control to the point where we're talking about a team that's then going 5-12 or 6-11, and then you're really questioning, well, does this guy have what it takes to command a locker room and get a group to rally and play for him? So I think that's a great message to send, not only to your ownership, but obviously to your fans, because you want to win, but you also want to see a team that can work through adversity, work through the issues that come up during a season, and find a way to still be successful. Yesterday's game was a damn microcosm of what we've seen this season. Like, you have all those things go against you in the first 25 minutes of that game. You're on the cusp of essentially getting blown out, and you make one play, and then all of a sudden you turn the entire tenor of the game, and then you end up finding a way to get out of there in a game that you ended up not favored at the end of the day to win. You were an underdog by the time that game kicked off. So I think there's some great messages that are sent not only to ownership and the front office that, hey, this guy might really have something here, but it's a incredibly reassuring message to the fans that, hey, this group is not going to be one that this is a coach that can get a group to rally around when things aren't going well and find ways to move forward and find success. And now we're talking about, what are their playoff percentages and what are their possibilities for, that kind of thing over the last, 5 weeks of the season here. So it's an incredibly encouraging sign, I think, for everybody.
Yeah, Curtis, he is a real even keel kind of personality and tone to him on that sideline.
Yeah, he is. He's not going to get too wild for the most part, except for that one play last week. He's going to keep his emotions in check for the most part. So it's definitely a different, demeanor we've seen on the sideline than over the prior 14, 15 years from Pete Carroll, for sure. But it's curious to see how he handles some of the struggles that we've seen this season, and what kind of moves he's going to make to try to address some of the things. We've obviously seen them be willing to make some personnel changes and all of that, but I think you want somebody who, when things are kind of spiraling around, you can stay calm and in the moment and all of those sorts of things. And I think that's one of the real benefits for Mike as well.
Yeah, he's done it, through 12 games. I just think you're right, Tim. Kind of a microcosm of the season to be where they're at right now at 7-5, and the way that game, right, Curtis, unfolded yesterday for them. I mean, they could have easily. I mean, they are a better football team than New York, but they could have easily just kind of got down on themselves and just like, oh my God, it's an early game. We're on the East Coast. We've won 2 straight. They were in the division. We're feeling good about ourselves, but they didn't. And they kept battling back, and credit to that defense, because that defense allowed them to stay in that football game despite all those just, miscues from that special teams unit.
Yeah, I mean, the defense basically held them to 14 points, right?
Yeah.
In the game. So, that's another really strong defensive outing overall. But, yeah, I mean, after the second lost fumble on a kickoff and their backs against the wall, looking at 28-7, there's a lot of teams that could just kind of pack it in at that point and have things really spiral on them. I mean, in some ways, it's kind of like the Bills game was a month and change ago, where a few things went wrong and it's a 31-10 result. You could have easily ended up with a game similar to that, given the way things had gone in the first 20-25 minutes of that game, with the turnovers and the kickoff return allowed and on all of those sorts of things. So for them to, be able to make a play to flip the momentum and then stay in it and not allow another point on the board the rest of the day. I mean, just an incredible defensive performance for sure. And while the offense had its issues, when they needed it, they got it. So another credit to them on that front for sure.
You guys will appreciate this being in sports media. I guess where I sit, it's more of the bombastic sports media, right? But yesterday's game was just perfect for sports media, because they won the game, check, which is great, and then there's plenty to bitch about afterwards. It's because you guys know it's no fun to win a game and everything's great and it's fun, because and that is fun to talk about. It's good, but you kind of run out of stuff, right? It's unfortunate. You need that negativity to kind of have both sides to it, right? It's why you never kind of want to be 8-8. You want to be 12-4 or 4-12. Or I guess now we're going 13-4, 4-13. Yeah. You never want to be in the middle. So that was a perfect game yesterday. You win, you're 7-5 in your first place, at the same time a fan base going, we need to fire the special teams coach and fire the offensive coordinator. And I'm like, this is great. You just can't ask for this stuff, Curtis. You know what I mean? You love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
I mean, the Chiefs are probably the holy grail, right? Because they're 9-1 or whatever, and every game they're on, it's they're just bare knuckling it.
What's wrong with the Chiefs?
Yeah, exactly. So, and they got the 2 Super Bowls in the back pocket too. So, from the last 2 years. So, no, I mean, for sure, it can be tough at times to find angles for a really great team or a really bad team at the extremes. It can be really tough. Think of one of those Mariners seasons where it's 110 losses in the year or whatever. It's you can only ask, why do you guys suck so many times? You can only write that story so
Next
many
question.
times.
Yeah.
They have given the fan base something to talk about for sure. And I do wonder if, I like a lot about what Ryan Grubb has done from a pass game standpoint for them this year, the shifts, the motions, and those sorts of things that they brought to the table. I do wonder if they might need to bring in a run game coordinator to try to find something to help marry with his scheme at the NFL level, because going back to the Leonard Williams conversation, you don't see guys like that outside of maybe a couple in the SEC at the college level. It's different. And when you have to scheme the game plan for those guys, and you see just about every team has somebody who's pretty strong on the defensive line, they just are not the scheme that they have, the execution of that scheme that they're running with the running game in particular is just not NFL quality right now. And I don't know how they get there with what they currently have on the table. I mean, that sequence at the goal line yesterday was abysmal.
Yeah.
And it's because of the fact that we go back to the Rams game, go back to the 49ers game where they have and one yardage opportunities that they spectacularly fail with running the football. Now it feels like you have to throw the ball in those circumstances because the running game has failed in so many of them previously that there's no balance to the offense in those moments because they can't do it. They've shown that they can't do it over and over. And you do finally have Zach Charbonnet bust the one to get you the touchdown you need at the end. But that's kind of the big problem within the short yardage, the goal line kind of run game not being at all consistent to where everything falls on Geno Smith's shoulders. And yeah, guess what? There's going to be some mistakes in there every once in a while. There wasn't yesterday, but we've seen that in the prior weeks. So they have to get better in that area.
Let's dissect what happened on the goal line, because I mean that's a lot of the frustration coming out of that game on Sunday is going to be what happened with the goal line issues. It's been an issue all season long. This short yardage, they just can't figure out. It's 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, how to get it. Whether they run the ball, it doesn't work. If they pass the ball, it doesn't work. It has been an issue. Going back to that sequence and you look at it. What was the most egregious about it? What was the biggest issue, at least analyze it? Because I would say this, that, I mean, the first play after DK, had the long reception, which you can make an argument, a better thrown ball, that's a touchdown.
Should have been a touchdown. Right. Without question. Should have been a touchdown.
I didn't like the fade pattern right away after he's clearly gassed. So I think you take an issue with that. The second down play, they handed off. So if you're like, run the ball, well, they did, and they don't really get anywhere. But the third play of that, the second play of that, I think is a well-called play. It's play action. They all bite, and Noah Fant's wide open. And he misses the throw. I mean, is that Ryan Grubb's fault, or is that Geno Smith's fault?
No, I mean, the whole sequence was infuriating, I guess, to say the least. So back to your point. So the first down play I didn't like. I would have, especially after, DK, as you said, DK runs down the field and then you're going to call a fade to him the first play. We all know how much we hate the Jeremy Bates end zone fade. Just throw it out. Never call it again. I didn't like that play call. I thought the second down run to Walker was fine. I probably would have flopped those. I probably would have run Walker on first down. See if you can bust it there. And if not, okay, then you move forward with the fact you can't run the ball. The third down pass interference call in the end zone when DK got mugged.
Oh yeah, that was the third play. I mixed that up. Yeah,
it seemed like there were some options there. It looked like a couple guys flashed early in that play, but I don't remember. I just remember Geno rolling out and then throwing to DK. I don't remember if he was pressured right off the jump on that play. But then, yeah, the one that sticks out to me was the throw to Fant because he's open, and that's not on Ryan Grubb. That's a good call. Fant's open. It's a bad throw by Geno. It's one of the few times you can look at it and go, that was a really poor throw that he makes, and everyone can grouse about everything else that happened around that, but that's on Geno to make the play. It was a good play call. He was open. But then, from there, like, I didn't like what I didn't like was, if I remember correctly, on the second 3rd and goal, and then on the other 3rd and goal, and then the 4th and goal, I don't remember Ken Walker being on the field on any of those 3 plays.
On the second down one, the Fant one, he was there.
Yes, but then they went third and goal with Charbonnet. He didn't gain anything. They had an offside on the Jets on that play.
Right.
Then Geno throws incomplete to DK, and then
Correct.
we have the mess on the sprint out where Geno just didn't sprint out.
Yeah, he's not on the field. Yeah, Walker's not on the field for those 2 plays.
That's my, like, look, the play calls were terrible because they didn't work. Okay, so we can't debate that. At the end of the day, they didn't work, so the play calls are bad. But look at what happened on the touchdown late in the 4th quarter where Charbonnet busts it and is able to get up the middle. Walker's on the field. You get your best running back on the damn field. Even if he's not getting the ball, give the threat that he is going to get the ball. Because not having him on the field instantly limits what the defense thinks is going to be coming toward them. Zach Charbonnet is not, I don't know what to think of Zach Charbonnet at this point, but Ken Walker needs to be on the field in those circumstances, even in a decoy situation. So yeah, the play calls were not great, but my issue was you didn't have your best running back on the field for any of those.
What do you think the learning curve has been for him, Curtis? Ryan Grubb, I'm speaking of.
Yeah, it's probably got to be with the running game and the leap in what the run scheme is going to require at the NFL level from college, just because of the defensive linemen you're going to face at the NFL level. You're not going to get, undersized defensive linemen moved out of the way in quite the same way as you can at the college level. Like Washington, the Seahawks are not going to face a team like, Boise State or something at the NFL level where, there's a different caliber of player there. Everybody at the NFL level is, should be there. They're quality football players, professionals, obviously. It's just different. And generally, I think the passing scheme, there's a lot to like. I mean, still, like, there's nothing this year that I think from the passing game with the motions and stuff, I think they're able to get the matchups they want. A lot of stuff to really like with the schemes that they kind of run there. They just need to be better. And obviously, they've been hampered from the offensive line to some regard, too, with their ability to run the football. It's not all scheme related, but they know what they are now at this point in the year, and they need to find some way to make it work. While we were talking here, I did a quick search for basically 3rd and 4th down and 1 rushes that they've had this year. They've converted just 56.5% of those, which is 4th worst in the league. They struggle in those scenarios big time. The only teams worse than them are Miami, San Francisco, ironically, and the Raiders. So they are. I think they've had 23 plays, and so they would have converted somewhere around, I guess, 11, 12 of those, something like that. I don't see exactly where it is on the sheet here, but they just have to find a way to be two-dimensional in short yardage situations where it's not all just we need to find some way to throw it in those circumstances because we can't get any push, any schematic leverage, any kind of run success in those short yardage areas.
Guys, if they just got a little bit more out of the running game, I mean, the running game is the thing that's just bringing them down the most. I mean, they're middle of the pack in terms of total yards, at least where they rank offensively. In fact, they're one spot just below Kansas City. I think a lot of that would surprise probably a lot of people. In terms of scoring wise, I think they're 14th. I think in scoring, it's the rushing numbers, 88 yards. I think that makes them like 29th or 28th there in the league. So they just. But I think it just goes back to I don't think that it's an issue with Ryan Grubb calling plays and him being pass happy. I just think it's an issue that they are not built, Tim, right now. And again, let's give this a few weeks with this offensive line. Let's see how they react here in the next few weeks and see if they get a little bit better at it, because I think now this is going to be the line moving forward, fingers crossed. And but just they're not a good run blocking team right now. But let's see if it improves here in the next few weeks with a set group.
Yeah, and Laumea, I mean, outside of the one play where he blocked his own guy, I loved them pointing that out on the broadcast. He was okay, but again, we're talking on a scale of a group that hasn't been able to run block all season, and so. Our expectations are so low, I guess, that anything that seems passable is going to be acceptable at this point. There's clearly things that you can scheme your run game to a certain point. Like you can kind of come up with some designs and try and do a few things here and there to try and create opportunities for running lanes. But at the end of the day, there's only so much you can do in the run game, short of going back to like the old triple option Pony Express from SMU back in the 80s. If you really wanted to really mess with people's minds, like their run blocking and their run game kind of is what it is at this point. And it's not. I don't think we're going to see drastic improvements because the personnel just isn't good enough to execute it the way that probably Ryan Grubb wants to execute it. And they can make tweaks here and there, and they can keep tinkering with trying to find something to unlock more consistency in it, but that's kind of the reality when you're 12 games into the season and you're rolling out a group of offensive linemen that includes Olu Oluwatimi and Satawa Laumea. I apologize if I'm hacking his name, but as your center and your right guard, like, you're only going to be so good or so successful when your personnel is what it is. So people just got to kind of accept it at this point. Like, the run game is going to suck. It's not going to be great. And you have an exceptional back in Ken Walker who makes a lot of stuff happen when negative plays probably should be the result, and he ends up getting a few yards here and there out of it. So yeah, the offense is going to be limited. It's just the way it is. And the fact that they're middle of the pack in scoring and in total offense is a credit to what they've been able to do in the pass game.
Next 3 games. Let's wrap it up with this. Next 3 games are just going to be. It's going to be fun to watch, Curtis. The next 3 in particular, and of course they got 5 games remaining at Chicago and at LA to finish up the season. But the next 3, right? Really going to give we think they're a good football team. How good are they? Curtis, will be determined here in the next 3. At Arizona, home games against Green Bay and Minnesota. What do you think they do here in the next 3?
If you win 2 of 3, you probably win the division, right? Probably, because it shows you can beat some pretty good teams along the way to do it. But, one of those probably has to be the Arizona game just to give you the leg up over a team chasing you. But, yeah, I mean, I think I don't know what to expect from them over this stretch. I really don't, because the level of opponents are getting better. Obviously, we saw them beat Arizona 2 weeks ago to show that they can compete with them at the very least. But we haven't seen them play, one of these NFC North teams in a while. I don't know that more than one team from the West is going to make the playoffs, so they probably have to win the division to do it. It's going to be, we'll find out what this team is over the next 3 weeks for sure, because the defense we know is what it is now. Like, it's made some real strides, and that unit looks like it can repeat that performance week in and week out in general. Can the offense make enough incremental improvements? And to go back to touch on the rushing game there, it probably was incrementally better yesterday, even there in some regards, because they had a couple runs that did break through where they hadn't seen much of that in recent weeks. But they just have to get a little bit better there to kind of balance that offense out. And that's where the tests against Minnesota and Green Bay are going to be really good ones for sure. Arizona's defense is obviously fairly solid as well. I don't know what to expect. I mean, I really don't. It's probably going to make these next few weeks really interesting in that regard, because they can play just a disgusting game against the Jets like we saw yesterday, and then play a really good game against Arizona for the week before. Like, they're a schizophrenic football team, and I don't know exactly what to expect from them at the moment.
Tim, how plausible? They got 3 more wins in the next 5. We think 10 wins is the marker for the division.
I think it's plausible. I mean, if you win in Arizona, if you can somehow get 2 of the next 3, you're going to win the division. I mean, it's as simple as that. Especially if one of those 2 is Arizona. It really comes down to that. If you're able to do that, then you're setting up week 18 in LA. Either you already got the division title in hand, or you're playing to win the division title in LA. If you can get 2 of the next 3. That's irregardless of what happens in Chicago, because you're playing on a short week the day after Christmas. It's a shitty situation. I don't know why they're getting screwed by the schedule makers this year, having to play 2 short week Thursday games, but it is what it is. So if you can figure out winning in Arizona, and then I don't know what to make of Green Bay. I think Green Bay is pretty good. I think Minnesota is really fraudulent. I don't understand how they are as good as they are this year with Sam Darnold at quarterback. If you can figure out getting one of those 2 and you win in Arizona, you're staring down 10 wins pretty easily. And I think 10 should get you the division title and a home playoff game. So will that happen? I got no clue. They could just as easily go 0-3 over these next 3 games. But What we've seen, the defense seems like it's got its stuff figured out. Can they win another ugly 16-6 game over the Cardinals this week? Can they grind out a 2017 win over the Packers, or a 2017 win over the Vikings? Yeah, they absolutely can. And if they can do that, I think we're talking about a playoff team at that point.
There it is, another edition of the Ground Puck Seahawks podcast with Curtis Crabtree, Fox 13, Tim Booth of the Seattle Times, brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated by two diehard Huskies, Manny and Roger. They've been pouring the best local craft beer for the past 23 years, makers of Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Zaffa IPA, host of your other favorite brews, taproom open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. As you see the website, if you're watching the stream, as Homer Simpson said, beer. Now there's a temporary solution. We welcome and we're happy that Georgetown Beer Brewery brings you Tim Booth and Curtis Crabtree every single week with us. In case you came in late, entire show will be up on YouTube later, so please go there, subscribe, and like away there, and also up on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, and of course always up at pucksports.com. Gentlemen, we'll